What's going on, YouTube? As you can see, the background is a little bit different than some of my normal videos, but we're gonna try something new today. And I've been wanting to make this video for so long. I just thought I had to script it. I thought I had to have the perfect story. I thought I had to tell you exactly, kind of have a well-crafted vision of what this video looked like, and I don't think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm just gonna wing it. Not necessarily wing it, but I'm just gonna tell you the authentic story of, why I started a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym as a purple belt, what my experience was, and the decision making and the reasoning behind ultimately deciding to close the gym a few years ago. And this has been a little while since I made that decision. My hope is that by making this video, I will inspire some of you guys who are interested in starting jiu-jitsu or starting a gym on your own or doing something like that, that it's possible. For anyone, it's possible. I also hope to for those of you that are interested in running a gym someday, share with you my experience and maybe enlighten you as to, the pros and cons or the benefits and some of the things that I didn't expect when it came to running a jiu-jitsu gym essentially on my own. And the third reason I want to make this video is to potentially open your eyes if you're under the illusion that running a jiu-jitsu gym is easy or that it's going to make you a lot of money. I want to kind of open your eyes and maybe give you a better picture as to what you're going into before you make that decision. Not that you shouldn't make the decision, but that you'll have a better picture of it. So the best place to start is the beginning, and I'm going to start with why I thought I was qualified to open up a gym as a purple belt. Well, when I started jiu-jitsu, I started at CTA Hillsborough. It was a Kyoterra affiliate, and when I stepped into the doors for the first time, the instructor was a purple belt. And that instructor was my coach from white belt all the way through black belt. But when I walked in those doors, my coach was a purple belt, and I was immediately skeptical. I was like, am I going to learn anything from this person? They're clearly not like an expert yet. But after doing a few rounds, I quickly realized that they were going to be able to teach me a significant amount. And they were still, even though they weren't a black belt, they were significantly light years ahead of me. So I signed up. It was a good deal. There were only 3 classes a week or 3 days of classes a week, and I trained in every single one. So 3 months after starting, the gym expanded. We switched locations, and the coach was able to add classes. They quit their part-time job or quit their job and added more classes. So now instead of training 3 days a week, I was training 4 days a week or 5 days a week if you include open mats, and I was getting a lot more mat time in. My goal was to be a business owner someday. I went to school for business, and I knew I wanted to start my own business. I just didn't know what exactly. And having trained for 6 months to a year, I started to think, maybe this is something that I could do. Fast forward to when I got my blue belt. I got my blue belt in about a year, and as soon as I got my blue belt, I started training 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, and even 2 times a day a lot of times. And so I was just adding mat time. I realized that if my goal was to open a gym and be a coach, that I needed to be proficient and skilled enough to share that information, share that knowledge. And I wanted to have confidence in my abilities because I didn't want to just be a snake oil salesman and share fake techniques with people. I wanted to make sure that I was providing a quality product. So in my mind, I was already thinking about running a gym, and that's what kind of led me to compete a lot. It led me to train a lot, get mat time adding up very quickly. And this is when I trained the absolute most in all of my jiu-jitsu. I think I trained the most as a blue belt and an early purple belt. So it took me about 2.5 years to get my purple belt from when I got my blue belt. So 4.5 years total to get my purple belt. Immediately after being promoted to purple belt, I asked my coach if I could start helping with adults classes when he needed a substitute, or with fundamentals, and assisting with the kids classes. I wasn't ready to teach kids on my own yet, but I wanted to see how it was done and kind of learn the structure and the process. So I started doing that. 6 months after getting my purple belt and helping with classes, my coach approached me and he said, hey, would you be interested in starting another gym in Forest Grove with me? Would you be my partner and open up a gym in Forest Grove? Forest Grove was where my grandparents lived, and I spent a lot of time there growing up, and I was pretty familiar with the area. And the funniest thing was I was already considering that location as a potential for my gym when I eventually got my brown belt or black belt or felt confident to do that. But purple belt, 6 months after getting my purple belt, I was surprised, a little shocked that he thought I was ready to do something like that, and super nervous. I didn't feel like I was ready. I didn't feel like I had developed the level of skills and confidence needed to teach adults. I was 25, 26 years old as a purple belt, and didn't feel like my jiu-jitsu was good enough, didn't feel like I was confident enough as an instructor. But nevertheless, my coach believed in me and wanted to do this with me. And this was in, give you a time frame here, February of 2019 is when he approached me, and April 1st of 2019, April Fool's Day, was the grand opening. We found an area, we found a location. It was a little bit bigger than either of us really wanted to commit to as a first gym. We were kind of trying to start small and work our way up to a bigger location, but it was the only spot available that made the most sense, and we ended up signing the lease and starting the classes on April 1st. You know, those 2 months leading up to April 1st was a lot of sweat equity, a lot of labor. I painted the walls, we put in flooring, we tore out carpet, we added the mats, we lined the mats, put up pictures, you know, the whole nine. It was a lot of work. And on top of this, while I was training all this time, while I was building the gym out, I was also working full time in a call center at Wells Fargo. So very busy schedule for me those the first 2 months. And then once classes started, I kind of approached the problem the same way that my coach had. While I was working full time, I decided to have 3 classes a week. 3 kids classes, 3 adults classes. And that felt manageable with my full-time schedule to where I could teach and have time to study and have time to train and improve myself. And it was working. I think in that first month I had 8 students, kids and adults, signed up from like pre-registrations and family friends that were interested and people that wanted to support me. And so that was nice to have a little bit of students going into that first month. But you know, I had a $2,800 a month lease and 8 students and $600 coming in. So obviously me and my partner, my coach, were subsidizing the business, subsidizing the losses until we could break even. So our number one goal was to break even. Luckily, I had some savings. I had been pretty frugal. I was lucky to live at home at the time with my parents, and I was just saving money. So I had a good amount of savings saved up to where I was able to afford subsidizing the expenses of the business and, you know, keep providing a good product to hopefully attract more students. And it seemed to be working. For the first year there, it was obviously a struggle. There were classes where 0 students showed up. There were classes where 5 or 6 students showed up. Kids classes was a little bit more steady. I had 5 to 10 kids regularly coming within the first 3 months, which was awesome. And then adults was a lot more spotty. I had 2 people some days, 5 people some days, 0 people other days, and those were the tough days because it felt like I was just paying to essentially work. I was just paying to show up at this gym where nobody wanted to learn from me. But despite that, I stayed true to my goals. I kept studying technique. I kept training at Hillsborough when I could and showing up every day on time before any of my students showed up. I showed up, was ready with a good class structure, a good program. I had studied the technique for the class before, and I felt like I was really putting a lot of effort in. Fast forward to March of 2020. It was a pretty exciting time because for April 1st, we were projected to break even for the first time. And break even was not including all of the subsidizing, all the costs that we spent subsidizing and starting the business, but it was break even in that the number of students we had would cover overhead. So we wouldn't be subsidizing it any further, and that was awesome. So we were planning a celebration. We were planning a 1-year anniversary party for April 1st, and I think everybody knows what happened in like the second week of March of 2020. COVID, lockdowns, basically derailed our entire plans for the gym and for my future career, really. You know, I thought 2 weeks to slow the spread, I can manage that. Turned into 4 weeks, turned into 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and we all know how long it took to get back to normal. But in that time, about 2 months into the lockdowns, my coach and my partner approached me and said, hey, you know, I've got my own problems to deal with. I've got to figure out how to make money with my gym, and you know, having this extra expense is more stressful than I want to deal with. And so I am withdrawing from the partnership. I don't want to be a part of the business anymore. I'm just going to deal with my own gym, and you can make whatever decision you want. You don't owe me any money. I don't owe you any money, but you can decide whether or not you want to try and stick it out or just close the doors. Because ultimately, after 2 months of running the gym through COVID, we had lost 50% of our students. So the break-even number was, let's see if I can remember. The break-even number was 42 students paying the base price. We were at 42 for end of March. 2 months after COVID started, we were down to 20. So we lost 50% of our students in 2 months and really had no in sight as far as when the lockdowns would be over. It was at this point where I had a really big decision in the future of the business. Did I want to quit and close just due to the uncertainty, due to the nature of the environment, with COVID being probably the worst possible black swan event for a jiu-jitsu gym? Or did I want to see this as an opportunity? And, not to fault my partner or anything, I knew that I would never be able to make a living as a 50% partner in a gym located in Forest Grove with a population of 20,000 people. So I saw this as an opportunity to continue working towards the goal of running a sustainable business, a sustainable jiu-jitsu gym out of Forest Grove where there were no other competitors as a sole owner, with really all thanks to my business partner and coach. And I stuck it out. So I called the landlord, who was a small business owner in the Forest Grove in the local community, and I said, hey, I can't afford rent by myself right now. I lost 50% of my students, kind of gave him the story, and he said, I would have a hard time finding a new business to lease this space, so I'm willing to let you pay 50% rent until you can cover the full rent. And that was huge for me because I could basically at that point it was break even. Despite losing 50% of my students, when the rent got cut in half, I was able to cover the lease and, give or take $200 or $300 that I would have to subsidize. Thankfully, I was able to keep the gym alive through COVID. I ran dummy classes. I ran in-person classes with masks and taped out 6-foot squares. That was absolutely horrible, but I also made online programs for students that were still paying that couldn't train. And it was really just a horrible time for jiu-jitsu. Somehow, CTA Forest Grove, and through sheer effort and will, survived COVID. And that first year, I think it was 2022, that first year after the lockdowns ended and restrictions released, I made the most money I'd ever made. School sports weren't open yet, so kids were flocking to the gym. Adults were flocking to the gym. I think at my peak, I had 75 students, so I was making probably $3,000 a month, which was pretty good money for me considering I was working at a call center making a little bit more than minimum wage. It was at this point, at the end of 2022, where I thought to myself, I'm still working full time. It's the only way that I could afford the gym through the COVID and subsidizing the business. So still working full time at the call center and also teaching 4 nights a week at CTA Forest Grove. I thought, I'm just half in, half out right now. If I want to know, I have to know whether or not this gym is an opportunity, if I can make a living doing this. And if I'm going to do that, I got to burn the ships. I got to go all in on my business. And so I quit my job. I put my 2 weeks notice in at Wells Fargo and immediately started adding classes to the schedule. I added morning classes, added an advanced class for the adults, added an additional kids class, added toddlers, and really just wanted to give more product, more bang for the buck when it came to the business and the classes and the gym itself to hopefully attract more of the community in Forest Grove. And it seemed like it was working for a little while. So for a few months going into 2023, classes were a good size. Kids classes were 20 kids. Adults classes were 10 to 12 on average. Obviously there were more people signed up, kind of like the typical gym model. People sign up, pay, don't show up very often. But I had a consistent student base for the first few months of 2023. And then the weirdest thing started to happen. Despite adding classes, despite advertising more, despite focusing more on studying and teaching more solid techniques and learning myself and training and just providing a better service. Despite all of that effort that I was putting in, the gym and the student count started to shrink. So that was pretty frustrating to see. And it was at this point I had gone to a competition and I was coaching some of my students, and I saw one of my peers, another coach, another gym owner that was coaching there, and I hadn't seen him in a bit. So I went over and I was like, hey, how are your students doing? Are you competing today? And he said, students are doing good. I'm not competing. I actually have a knee injury. I tore my ACL like a couple months ago. And I'm like, oh shoot, dude, I'm sorry to hear that. Are you going to PT? Do you have to get surgery? What's the status? And he's like, well, I can't afford PT and I can't afford surgery, so I'm kind of just self-PTing it. And that kind of shook me, because hearing that from him, he was running what I saw as a successful gym in a similarly sized city. We actually had in a similarly sized city. I think he had 2 gyms too, but he was running a semi-successful gym and had a family and was supporting his lifestyle, which didn't seem over the top by any means, but he couldn't afford surgery. And the other thing too, he said, was that if he took the time off for surgery, even if he could afford surgery, if he took the time off, he wouldn't be able to coach, which means his gym would have a hard time surviving. And this shook me, because if he doesn't have the ability to support his health, barely support his family, and his gym is doing better than mine, not what hope do I have, but what's the total potential of this gym? It was this point that I started kind of considering, okay, I have to make a goal. I have to set a hard number and decide, I don't want to be in this forever and just waste career earning potential trying to grow a gym in a small local community that may not ever be able to provide me a livable wage, especially with inflation and with rising expenses and the fact that I was still living with my parents. I wanted to be able to buy a house someday. So I was starting to look at it as if maybe just putting my time into this gym, as much as I cared about my students and the community that I built, I had to live. So I said my goal was, and I had dropped from 75 students total in my highest month in end of 2022, mid 2022. I had a total of 75 students. By the first few months of 2023, like I said, the students had started to drop, and I was down to, I think, 60. So I'd lost 15 students, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's, $1,500 a month essentially at minimum that I was missing out on income-wise, and I didn't have a job anymore. So my expenses were almost more than what the gym was even bringing in, and unfortunately it wasn't going up, it was going down. So I told myself if by the end of 2023 I didn't have, if I had lost more students, or if I had lost more students and didn't at least have 60 to 65 students still, then I would have to make the decision to close the gym. The main reason that I had to come up with this deadline was because my savings that I had built up to subsidize the gym had basically been exhausted through COVID and the year before COVID. I think that if things had gone well and COVID hadn't happened, break even in April of 2020, making a little bit of profit, maybe lose a few students here and there, I think that I would have been able to keep the gym open. But unfortunately, my savings were exhausted, my expenses were more than my income, and there didn't seem to be much potential or much future, at least short term, down the road. So when it came time to get closer to the end of 2023, which was when my lease was up, or my lease was due to be extended or ended, I looked at the numbers and I had 55 students. And by this point, my expenses were definitely higher than my income. My income had gone down, my expenses hadn't really changed, but I wasn't making enough money to, 1, save anything, but 2, I was also going into debt just to keep the doors open. So when it came time to check the numbers, I realized that the numbers didn't add up, and I had to make the decision to close. Now I will say, I had the gym open for 4 years. It opened April 1st, 2019, and it closed November of 2023. So about 4.5 years. Those 4.5 years of running the gym were some of the best times in jiu-jitsu that I've ever had. I loved my students, the kids and the adults. I saw improvement in everyone. I felt like my jiu-jitsu had improved in that I was forced to study and learn more about technique and more broad portions of jiu-jitsu as opposed to just sticking to my game. And the people, the community that I built, I had a great culture. I had 65 5-stars on Google. There was word of mouth happening, but unfortunately, it was just 2 steps forward, or it was 1 step forward, 2 steps back, it seemed like, and I just couldn't get to the point where I was making enough money. But I will never deny that running CTA Forest Grove Jiu-Jitsu was one of the most fun periods of jiu-jitsu in my entire time training. Some of the benefits were the friends that I got to make, the community. I felt like I made a lasting impact on the kids that I coached. I felt like I made an impact on the adults that I coached. I felt like my jiu-jitsu improved. I was providing a service to a city that didn't have any jiu-jitsu as it was without me. But some of the disadvantages were, it's a small town, it was a college town. And I thought that being a college town, it would be a benefit. I would get more students that way. But college kids don't have disposable income. And if I take the college students out of the population of Forest Grove, the average age was over 50, I think. And so that's not really the demographic for jiu-jitsu either. So my ability to build an adults program was pretty much hamstringed by the demographic of the city. And kids program was doing fine, but I just couldn't compete with school sports when I didn't have an adults program also supplementing some of that student base. So disadvantages wise, I think I made a few mistakes picking Forest Grove as a legitimate community for a sustainable business. If I had a second source of income, like, I don't know, YouTube, maybe I should have stuck with YouTube more, right? But if I had a second source of income that could kind of subsidize the small piece of income coming in from the gym, then I probably could have stuck it out. Or if I had a larger savings, I could have stuck it out. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. And the decisions to close the gym ultimately came down to finances. I couldn't afford to keep the doors open. And not only that, I didn't really see a future for a career in that location as much as I wanted to. So, what I wanted to mention, I kind of go back a little bit. With the demographic of the city, when I did get adults, I think I promoted 6 or 8 blue belts between the time when I opened to when I closed. Of those 6 to 8 blue belts, I think 60% of them, so like 4 of them in my first 2 years moved. And it wasn't due to, finding a better gym or anything like that. It was, hey, me and my wife are moving across the country, or hey, I got deployed back to Japan, or whatever. There were regular life things that happened. Also, hey, I'm graduating college. I'm not going to be living in Forest Grove anymore. Makes sense, dude. It's a tiny town, and you're not going to be able to find the jobs that you could in Portland or further away from this small town. So people were just moving for normal reasons that were, I think, more prominent in a small town like Forest Grove as opposed to if I opened in Hillsborough or Beaverton or a bigger population city where there were careers available, where it wasn't just a cycling door of college students just graduating, enrolling. Like, I didn't really see an opportunity in Forest Grove to build a long-term successful gym with the demographic of the city, and that was a mistake that was something that I didn't really consider when I opened it. Another mistake was opening in a big facility. $2,800 a month is a lot to subsidize when you don't have really that many students signed up already. So starting smaller would have been a good plan. I could have broke even earlier, and I could have subsidized the gym longer. I wouldn't have eaten as much of my life savings. And those were some of the things that I think, looking back on, I would do differently. Ultimately, I just kind of wanted to tell you guys this story because I still think about Forest Grove Jiu-Jitsu every day that I teach a class at my current gym. Every student that I taught that was able to transfer from Forest Grove to Hillsborough, that's still training, it's just a joy in my heart to see them getting better and to continue to enjoy the sport of jiu-jitsu. I just wish that, you know, I could have made it work in Forest Grove. Boat just went off. But hopefully my experience, you guys can learn from it in some fashion. I want you to understand, I didn't get to train as much as I wanted, but I got to study more. I didn't get to spend time with my friends from my old gym, but I got to make new friends in my gym. There are a lot of good things that come with opening a gym. It's just harder than you think, and I really miss my time running a gym. And maybe I'll do it someday in the future. Either way, if you guys like this story, it was kind of rambly, but hopefully you found some value in it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. As always, stay consistent, go train. Oh yeah, by the way, forgot to say this in the early part of the video, but if you can guess where I'm at, comment it down below. That bridge should be a pretty big hint. That's all I'm gonna give you. It's a great day. The Denver Nuggets won. Go Nugs. And I got a new tattoo, which is why I'm out here. So in case you were wondering, there's a lot going on in that video. But again, I appreciate you guys. Take care.